Hey y'all, I'm Carolina Tony. Today we are coming to you from Miss Debbie's Kitchen. Now we have done a few cooking videos before, but today we are going to introduce to you one of my favorites, collards. Now, a lot of folks, when you mention the word collards, they either love them or they hate them. Some folks have developed a distaste for collards because of the way they tasted when they ate them for the first time. I'm going to assure you, if you've eaten collards that's been cooked right, you will love it. Anyway, we're going to get started with a step-by-step process right after this station identification. Now, when you purchase collards, we normally go to a field and from someone we know, we cut them, but you can go to the grocery store and they come in a great big bunch, kind of like a large cabbage, and they come on a stalk like this. Now, Miss Debbie takes and cuts them off, and I'll let her explain to you her process.
Like Tony said, when you first get your collards, especially if you get them from a field somewhere from a local farmer, they're going to come on a stalk that looks like this, and you're going to have large leaves that will come off the stalk. And what I do is I just go and I will just pull off the leaf just like that, and then I'll start preparing them after I do that. And this part gets thrown away, and then I'll show you what I'll do with the stalks as well. So when you're taking your leaves off of the stalk, I kind of grade mine as I'm doing them, as I'm pulling them off, so I don't have to do that later. So this would be a leaf that I would discard because it's got holes in it where probably a bug has eaten them or something. So I would not use this leaf. However, I would use this leaf. Nice, healthy leaf. Nice and green, no holes, and then we're going to prepare what I do to take the stalk off, because that would be a part that you don't want because it's tough and you're going to want to cut that out.
So most of the time the larger leaves are not going to be your most tasty leaves.
It's going to be like a cabbage. You know, when you get a cabbage from the grocery store, you'll have those outer leaves, and some of those outer leaves don't look very well, and you want to pop those off a lot of times at the grocery store. That's going to be the same way with the collard leaf. You're going to discard usually those leaves that are underneath, and I'm sorry I don't have a head, but I went ahead and did those. But you're going to discard those leaves that are going to be closer to the ground, and you don't want to eat those.
No, you're rolling.
Now what I'm doing here is these are the leaves that I have taken off of the stalk, and I'm going to wash them to make sure that I've gotten all of the dirt or anything that would be left on the leaf. And all I do is just take those, rub them in my hands, and just give them a nice bath so that I'm making sure. Now also what I do is I do look over the leaves to make sure that I don't have any bad places that I left on the leaf. Like here's one right here. If you'll see, it looks like something has maybe eaten that area there. So what I'll do with that is I will just take that and just pinch it off and discard that, and then I will just continue washing. And you'll also notice that some of the leaves are going to be very big, some of the leaves are going to be very small. This particular type of cabbage is what they call a cabbage leaf collard. And if you had seen it whenever Tony brought it in from the field, it reminds you of a cabbage. Now these are really hard to find. I like these the best. But most collards that you find in the grocery store are not cabbage leaf collards.
Yeah, and cabbage has got like a head in the center.
This would be another one. That area there I'm gonna make sure that I just kind of tear around it so that if there was anything on that, then we're not gonna be eating that. And then I'll just leave that part of it like that. I learned to cook collards probably, well, Tony and I have been married. March will be 46 years. There was a lady that lived behind us, and she told me one day to come over there. She was going to teach me how to cook collards. And so she kind of took me under her wing to learn how to cook them. And Tony will tell you, or so he thinks, that my collards are some of the best that he's ever eaten. Now I'll tell you, my collards are not savory collards. My collards are going to be more on the sweet side, and they're going to be more fried and not in a lot of juice. Okay, what I do next is I run me a sink of water, and my sink is clean, and so I'm going to just put water in my sink, and mine is lukewarm just because I don't want to have my hands in cold water when I go to do the next step. But the only water that I will have in my pot when I'm cooking my collards is the water that is left on the collards as I take them out of the sink. So you've already washed your collards, so the purpose of this water is not to wash them, but the purpose is just to put them in water so that you can take water out as you're putting them in the sink, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to start cutting this large stem out of the collard. You don't want that in your collard because it's going to be it's thick, it's going to be rough, and it's not going to be very tender when you cook your collards. Now you can buy collards already cut at the grocery store, and I have tried those, and they're not my particular favorite because when they cut the collard up, they leave the stem in, and you'll have those tough pieces in there.
No, it's edible.
It is edible.
It's just not good.
It's just, I don't particularly like it. So you do need a sharp knife in order to cut this stem out, and I use just a cutting block to do that. So I'm going to lay my collard down. Now you can tear the collard away from the stem, but I never have quite mastered that. I guess I didn't learn how to do that, and so that's just not my preferred method to do that. But you will see some people talk about tearing the leaf away from the stem, but I prefer to cut my collard away from the stem. Okay, so all we're going to do is we're going to take our knife. You don't have to go all the way up to the top because this is going to be fairly tender here. So wherever you start noticing that your stem is getting thick, you're just going to take your knife, run it down the side, both sides, just like that, and cut it across the top. And that's what you're going to end up with, and then you're going to put that to the side. So again, and you'll see this one, obviously I tore away part that I didn't think was good, and so we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to go down the side of the spine of the stalk and cut away and put those to the side. Now I'm going to show you what to do with those in just a minute. So again, just run it down the side.
Okay.
And
you gonna talk or you just gonna cut? I was going.
What you want to do too, when I cut my stem out, this is the right side of the collard, this is the back side of the collard, and that is where you want to cut your stem out from the back side, the lighter side, not the darker side.
Why?
Because you can see the stem. If I look at this one, you can't really see where the stem spine is on the front side, but on the back side, you can see exactly where the spine is on the stem. And you can just run your knife beside it. This is kind of the tedious part of it, is cutting this spine out, but I promise you, if you just take the time to do it, your collards will be much better for it. If you'll notice, this is a little tender collard. This is going to be on the very center of your collard. So you see your leaves are very small, and this stem is tender. So if you didn't want to cut that stem out, you really don't have to, because that stem is a very tender stem. But most of the time I'll go ahead and do it anyway, except for the very, very, very small inner leaves on your collard. And you want to get all of your leaves, because you want those little tender leaves as well. You still may see some things that you overlook, just like that little piece there. But in your cabbage collard, your leaves are not as big as the other style of collard. And honestly, I don't know what that style of collard is called, and that's what you'll find most frequently, especially down here, is the larger leafed collards. And so the leaves are going to be very, very big. You'll notice that most of these leaves are smaller than probably what you may have seen on a collard in your local grocery store.
Well, you can see how much time it takes to do this. So it's easy to understand why in restaurants and places like that, they can't take the time to cut collards like this for the masses, because it would take forever. So that's why when they do have collards in restaurants, most of the time they just cut it all up.
And that's why Tony doesn't get collards as often as he would like to. It is time consuming. We're almost done with cutting these stems out. Now you'll notice that I am just using the very tip of my knife and running down the side of the collard leaf. These last two, I'm just going to cut the very end off, and I'm going to leave the stalk in that.
Now, if we were in a depression, we would be eating that, because all of those stalks are edible. They're just not as tender and tasty.
So we're going to throw these away. Now what I do is I stack my collards up by size, my collard leaf up by size. Now you will see some people that will take them and tear them. That's not my preferred method. Again, I didn't learn how to do collards that way, and I like my collards cut in ribbons. So they're about that wide, about 1/4 of an inch wide, I guess. And so I will stack them by size. So I'm going to find my larger leaves first, and I'm going to just stack, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4. Now you see this is a bigger leaf. So I'm going to put it on the bottom, and I'm going to stack, I'm going to do 4. And then this end of the collard here, I'm going to show you, is more of a little ruffly end, where we cut the stalk off. So if you look at these, you'll see they kind of hang down a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these and I'm going to kind of fold them in. And then I'm going to start rolling them kind of like you would do an egg roll, I guess. And then you'll see this end down here is not going to be as tight, but we're going to re-roll those. And so then I'm going to take my knife and I'm just going to make little ribbon cuts, just like this. And that's what I said when I like my collards in ribbons. This is what I'm talking about. I like mine in smaller pieces. And so when I get a bunch like that, I'm going to take them off, and remember my water over here. I'm going to throw them in the sink, and then I'm going to roll this tighter. So we're going to get this end roll tighter. And I'm just gonna cut. This is, again, time consuming. I've tried to cut them with scissors, and it's just not my preferred method, so it is time consuming. So we're gonna take those and we're just gonna throw them over in the sink, and we're gonna do the same thing until we get them all cut. We're just gonna lay them on top. If I find a bigger piece, I'm going to take it and put it underneath. And I usually start with, I put my dark side up. Again, I don't know why, it's just...
It lays flatter.
I guess it just lays flatter. So, again, we're going to take the end where they may be a little longer, fold them up, and we're going to start rolling, just like an egg roll. And then we're going to cut. And I prefer a smaller knife. You may be able to use a bigger knife, but this is just what I prefer. And you need a fairly sharp knife. Fortunately, Tony gave me some knives for Christmas a couple of years ago, and they are wonderful. So we're down to our last few little pieces of collards leaves. Now you'll notice as I'm cutting these, they're going to be very small, and they are very tender, and so it does not take much effort to cut through these at all. But you want these nice little tender little leaves, so get as many of them out of the collard bunch as you can. I try to get down to pretty much all of them if I can, because I like the little tender ones. Now, this is our sink full of water, and you see there's a lot of collards, and don't be alarmed with how much collards you have. You'll think, oh my gosh, that's an awful lot of collards, and this is a good bit, but they're going to cook down to where you're almost going to have nothing. Now, I will tell you, Tony was asking me about my pot. I have been cooking, and I know it looks terrible, and this pot is probably...
Since we've been married.
Older than that, okay? So, I have nice stainless pots, and I have tried to cook collards in those nice stainless pots, and I cannot do it. Tony asked me what the secret was. I have no idea. I don't know if it's how it holds water. I'm not really sure, but if I were to lose this pot, I don't know that I could cook collards anymore. So
Lord, don't say that.
It looks rough, and I understand it looks rough.
It's just an old aluminum pot.
It's just an old aluminum pot that had some Teflon in it, and it was a set of cheap pots that I got when I was in college.
Yeah,
so
we know we've already eaten all the Teflon off of it.
This is the collard pot. This is pretty much all I cook in this pot is collards.
And if you listen to a lot of old timers or country cooks that cook country or southern food, you'll hear them talk about their collard pot. So there must be something to it. Maybe it's a supernatural thing. Who knows? Who knows? Now, the water doesn't necessarily have to cover the collards.
No, you don't. In fact, you don't want the collard to cover. You don't want the water to cover the collard. So I am just going to pick up a handful of collards, and I'm just going to let the water drip off of them, and then I'm going to put them in my pot. And pretty much that is all the water that I'm going to have in that collard pot. I may add some, depending, but pretty much that is going to be the amount of water. So when we talk about the pot liquor, that's the reason why my collards don't have the pot liquor, is because I don't have a lot of water in my collards.
So now all those collards gonna fit in that pot?
Eventually they will. So, now if you look at, you see how I cut them up what I call ribbons? And that's about how wide I want my collards to be cut. I mean, it's not uniform. There's no exact science. If you see, some of them are thinner than others, but pretty much that's about as wide as I want my...
1/4 inch to half, 5/8, maybe.
Exactly. Don't measure it. It really doesn't matter in the big scheme of things, because some of mine might be bigger. Like you see, that was going to be bigger there.
Yeah.
So and then some I might not have cut all the way apart, like that one there. It's okay. It's just...
It all comes out on the plate.
It all comes out on the plate. So you'll see this pot is heaping of collards, and I still have a good many collards left in the sink. And what's going to happen is I'm going to put these on the stove. I'm going to put a lid on them, and I'm going to turn them on. And it's not going to take long. These are going to wilt down,
Cook down.
They're going to cook down, and I'm going to be able to put the rest of those collards in my pot. I'm going to turn my stove right now on high, and I am going to get the lid. And again, the lid to the pot looks as bad as the pot does, but obviously there must be some kind of magic in my collard pot.
Magic collards.
Magic collards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my lid on my collards just like that, and then they're going to steam down, and then I'm going to take the rest of the collards and put in the pot, and then we're going to talk about seasoning them.
Okay, action.
Now these have only been on just a minute or two, literally.
Okay, you've moved the temperature down to medium.
I've turned it down to medium. And remember how full our pot was, and this has only been a couple of minutes. You see they're starting to cook down. So I'm going to give it a couple of more minutes.
So you don't need to turn them on the bottom or anything?
Nope, not turning them or anything. And so I'll give them a couple of more minutes to cook down a little more, and then we'll add the rest of the collards and we'll start cooking. Now, what I season my collards with, I do salt and pepper, and I also use the grease from Fatback. Now, from some of you that may be in the north, you might not be familiar with Fatback, and it is the fat off the back of a pig.
Fatback.
Fatback.
But it's got another name too.
Salt pork.
Salt pork.
So this is what you can find in the grocery store. It's pretty prevalent down here in the South. And what I will do is I will take a few strips of this salt pork. So Fatback, which this is not really Fatback. You'll see this looks more like bacon, a little more bacony. The Fatback is cured in salt, and it will be very salty when you take it out of the package. It will be, you'll see the salt on the meat. Now this does not have it. Again, it's going to look more like, and this has been in the freezer, that's why it's dark. This will look more like bacon. And so I'm going to take 3 or 4 pieces of this, and I'm going to put them in the microwave. And all I want is the grease off of the Fatback. I want to put them in another one of my trusty little dishes here.
Microwave dishes.
And I'm just going to...
Microwave safe dishes, yeah.
And I'm going to cook them, and then I'll show you what to do. But
go ahead.
All right, so you see we've got it pretty much well wilted down, and I'm going to add the rest of my collards, because I don't want these to cook a whole lot more than the other collards do. So we're going to do the same thing, just going to pick up a handful, and we're going to put them in there until we have all of the collards in the pot. And then you'll notice that we're going to have a pot full again, and we're going to put them back on the stove, and we're going to let them steam down. Collards have a high source of vitamin C, so they are very, very nutritious for you. So you see my pot's full again. I'm going to put it back on the stove, and we're going to let them steam down again. Going to put my lid back on. We have some more water in there, and we're going to let them steam down.
Okay.
Now, I cover my fatback, salt pork, whichever one you have. You can use bacon. And I cover this up, and I leave a little vent hole right here so that
Don't splatter grease over.
it doesn't splatter grease all over my microwave, and then there's a little steam vent there. Okay, so we have cooked it for 3 minutes. You need to be very careful because it does get very hot. So you need to let your steam off and escape. And be very careful when you take this off to check it as well. So, if you'll notice that grease is what I want. So I could cook it a little longer, but that's going to be enough grease for me. You don't need an awful lot. So we're going to call that good. So remember how when we put our collards in, we had a full pot. Our salt pork cooked for 3 minutes, and you see we're already down. Now, you'll also notice that on the bottom, those were the collards that I put in first. They're going to be a little darker than the collards that I have on the top.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, that they're bright green on the top, and the bottom they're getting a little darker.
Yes. Now, another thing I'll tell you about collards, you don't want to buy collards until a frost has fallen on your collards. It does something to that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to just take this grease and we're just going to pour that out and on top of the collards. You see it's not an awful lot.
Just a little bit.
Just enough. So you don't need an awful lot. If you felt like that you needed more grease, I could put that back in the microwave and cook it for a little longer. And depending on how it looks after I stir them up, because the grease is going to make them look shiny now. So you can kind of tell whether you've got enough grease on your collards or not by how shiny they look. And you'll see it does not take an awful lot. Now if you'll look down in the bottom of the pot, you see I still have
water in it.
I have water in it. But I don't want a lot of water because I want mine to my collards to kind of fry and not cook in water. We're going to season them, and it's going to be to your preference, how much salt, how much pepper. I really can't tell you how much that will be. Some people like a lot of salt. We're not big salt eaters. So I don't actually put a lot of salt in mine.
And again, these salt shakers are as old as we are.
They are nice Tupperware. If you've been around for a while, you know what I'm talking about. And then same thing with pepper.
You know, I wonder, you see a lot of cooks, they have their fancy salt and pepper shakers. Ours are just for looks. But we use them sometimes.
We use them sometimes.
But a lot of your country cooks, they have the things that they like, and that's what they use. Right down to salt and pepper shaker.
Well, if it works, it works. Don't mess up a good thing.
Well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly. And so all I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of mixing up the collards that I had in there to start with versus the collards that I just put in there, mixing up the grease and distributing the salt and the pepper. And then in a little, now these collards may cook quick. You may find that you may have to cook your collards for an hour. You may find that you may cook your collards for 30 minutes. Just depends on how tender the leaf of your collards are. Those little tiny little leaves, those new leaves in the center, they're going to cook very quickly. If you had some large outside leaves, they may cook, it may take longer. You're just going to have to taste them and see how done they are. And then as we get closer to being done, we'll come back and I will show you my magic ingredient. Okay, we're back. It's probably been about 10 minutes. What I've done while you've been away is I have stirred them a couple of times. And if you will look, I did add just a little bit more water, not much. But you see, I just kind of stirred them so that they will be mixed up. You see now most of them have already turned a darker green.
And there's very little liquid in the pot.
Still very little liquid in the pot. Even after adding a little bit more, there's still very little liquid in the pot. So remember I said my collards are sweet. Some people like savory. It just depends on what you like. You cook yours the way you want to. If you do want them savory, you probably need to cook them with bacon or some type of ham, that sort of thing. And again, that's just not how I cook my collards, but there's certainly many ways to do them. But what I do when they get about to this stage, I'm going to add a little bit of sugar. And this is just white granulated sugar. This is a 1/4 cup. I probably will not use all 1/4 cup, but I'm just going to sprinkle it on there. That's probably half of the 1/4 cup, maybe a little less. And then I'm going to stir them up and still let them continue to cook. You'll just need to taste them through the process to see how done they are. Again, collards that have had frost fall on them are going to be more tender for some reason than collards that have not. I normally do not cook collards until I know that at least one frost has fallen on them. Now these are going to be almost done, and probably will need to cook about, I don't know, maybe another 5-10 minutes. They should be done, no more than 15. We'll taste them, see how they are, and we'll go from there. These have cooked for probably about 45 minutes. You're just going to have to judge for yourself. I've stirred them quite a few times. I did go back and add more sugar. I ended up using the whole 1/4 cup of sugar. It just depends on your collards. Your collards may be sweeter. They may not be sweeter. It just depends on your individual taste, on how you like them. I did add a little more salt, and I did go back and add the rest of the sugar.
Now these collards were also harvested late in the season.
They were harvested late in the season.
So it's about this time of year the farmers will start turning them under if they haven't sold them. So that, you know, this you're not going to be your most optimum taste, you know, waiting late in the season.
You know,
but you do want to wait until after the frost has fell on them.
Exactly. So those two heaping pots of collards that we started with, now after they've cooked, this is how much we've got left. So you see they do cook down about half. So don't be alarmed when you've got a huge pot of collards and it's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with that? You know, they will cook down. So just be aware of that.
Well, let's try them out.
All right.
All right, here comes the, what do you call this?
Taste test.
Taste test, moment of truth. Wow, that was really good. But only one thing it needs, cornbread. But that's coming up in another video. Well, I want to thank Carolina Debbie for helping me in this video. I hope you will find it very beneficial to your dinner table. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your family and friends. Also, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. And until next time, y'all have a good day.